African Shamanism. Part 1. In 10 minutes, or less. This is Kikiki. He was a great, and very feared Zulu Sangoma, or shaman. He could suck the venom from a living, and very deadly, green mamba snake without being harmed. We will talk more about him later. Shamanism in Africa dates back further than almost any other region of the world, with the possible exception of Australia. Africa has a rich and complex tapestry of shamanic practices. Among the many shamanic traditions, those of the Zulu, Swazi, Xhosa and Ndebele tribes of southern Africa are the most well known. We will be focusing on the Zulu tradition. Zulu shamans are called sangomas. They can heal the sick. They provide deliverance from evil. They are the intermediaries between the physical and the spiritual world. They are entrusted with the responsibility of knowing and orally passing down the myths and cosmologies of the Zulu people. To understand the ways of the Sangoma, we need to first understand the Zulu view of the world. All of the indigenous religions of Africa have a core belief that their ancestors are living beings that have an active role in the lives of the living. It's important to understand that ancestors are not simply dead relatives. One becomes an ancestor by living and dying in a particular way. In African traditions, to become an ancestor, one must have lived a moral life, shown devotion to one's own ancestors, respected the elders, and had children. Among many ethnic groups, you must also have a good death. Death by suicide, accident, or other forms of violence outside of the battlefield is not a good death. The ancestors are also venerated because they were once elders who walked the path that we are walking today. They are predecessors of all who are living, and are now in a spiritual state of existence that gives them power to assist the living. This is a core belief produced by thousands of years of African thinking. The closest we have of this, in Western society, is the veneration of saints, seen in the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. Catholics believe that their saints are intermediaries between God and man. It is their role in heaven to pray for the protection, comfort and healing of the faithful. This concept of sainthood parallels the African reverence for ancestors, in that both believe that the spirit of the truly virtuous do not die, but continue to have an active presence in the lives of the living. In the African traditions, the ancestors are not malevolent spirits, carrying a big stick. They are not here to punish the wicked or reward the good. It's all about blessings. The ancestors will bless those who can avoid their anger and win their favor. Pain and suffering does not come from the ancestors. It comes from life. In this tradition, life is seen as a primal struggle between good and evil. The ancestors are there to help with this struggle. The Sangoma acts as a medium between the ancestors and the people. He or she lives in a hut called an ndumba. This living space is shared with the ancestors, who are represented by intricately carved wooden figures that may be hundreds of years old. They are considered the physical manifestations of the ancestors, and are brought out on every ceremonial occasion, from births to deaths. Before we deep dive into the shamanistic practices of the Sangoma, we need to briefly review one more Zulu concept. In the Zulu tradition, there are three aspects of being. The first is the physical body that decays slowly while living and with death. This is called inyama or umzimba. The second is the vital force that keeps us alive. This is Kaleja Moya or Umfafumulo. The third is a shadow personality called Izithunzi. Once the Umoya leaves the physical body, the person is dead, and the body is buried and rots. But, the shadow personality of the deceased lives on as an ancestral spirit. It then goes to the underworld. The importance of this concept of spirit, in Zulu thought, is that it can be removed by others, and held captive. This spirit can become good or evil. It can also be weakened. Which is a big problem, because this vital force is essential for strength and vitality. So far, we have reviewed the essential duties of the Sangoma. We have outlined the importance of ancestors and presented briefly the Zulu concept of being. We are now ready to deep dive into the shamanistic practices of the Sangoma. And in the end, we will review the remarkable life of Kikiki, a Zulu Sangoma shaman. We will continue this discussion in part 2.